begs that question. If you're sitting there thinking about spending $200 million and you go, well, where are the major employers? And they say, well, we don't really have any. You immediately raise that issue. Well, why don't you have any? Am I the first one? Am I taking an extraordinary risk here? So in our case, it's just historical because we've grown so fast, and we can explain that. But it's very important to say, wow, we have all these businesses being created here in our community. Over half our businesses are startups and home-based businesses. And eventually what will happen, we're already starting to see it, especially in this downturn, is some of those businesses are going to start to fail or they're going to have problems. So we need to start to develop the beginnings of a retention program so that we can keep the customers that we have and build them into better customers. So, those are three simple goals that we have, but it kind of comes out of some planning that's been done, and I just want to touch on that so you understand the historical context. Back in 2004, we went through a process with APS called a Focus Future 2 plan. This is an approved plan of the City Council, and the City Economic Development Department has been kind of working off of that plan, and those three goals boiled down come out of it. The three basic premises behind that plan was that we should try and create a desirable community. In other words, one that has good amenities and quality of life. We should develop an educated workforce, which again is still a theme that we have, and that we want to ensure positive economic growth. And the original healthcare and biotech initiatives or impulses kind of came out of that. So that's where that came from in 2004. Second is, a year or so ago, we had an economic positioning framework done through the Community Development Department, and it really drove us into the whole idea of sustainability and also into these emerging economic clusters: solar, waste to energy, clean technology, all the kinds of stuff that the green technologies that are coming up so rapidly on the agenda, public agenda today. In fact, you probably saw just in the paper they've been running a series in the Arizona Republic about sustainability. Well, much of what is being talked about is actually in this framework plan. So Surprise has been carefully laying the groundwork and starting to get into position for some of these things. So growing those kinds of economic clusters, plus building innovation capacity. A key element in that plan is that we should try and harvest or harness the knowledge of the baby boomers that we have here and the retirees. And I know our department has been running a number of little experiments where we're trying to engage some of the retirees in what we're doing, and it's been extraordinarily successful. I mean, we have some biotech people helping us. We have some people of knowledge and sustainability. I mean, one guy in particular that comes to mind, he had a hand in setting up the environmental department for the city of Chicago, if you can imagine that. And he lives in our community. So we have these kinds of extraordinary talents here that we're starting to make use of and starting to kind of promote. In fact, Sun Health Research Institute has 2 biotech chemists on their staff, 2 biotech researchers who work for $1 a year and have published more papers since they retired than they did in their entire careers. So you think about that and you realize the talent base we have. Sun City Engineers Club has 175 members. So, we need to harness that. And then we're also trying to, of course, and there was discussion in this plan about enhancing our economic climate and the quality of life, higher education, again, as a theme, things like, incubators and any number of things that would help us to build our city. And then thirdly, we're very much aligned with GPEC's plans, very tuned into what's called GPEC Next, which is a whole initiative about high-wage industries, and Barry touched on that. The Arizona Global Network, which is, in part of GPEC. In fact, they led it, but, there's other people involved in it. We're involved in foreign direct investment. Our preparations here locally were right in sync with that. I mean, my whole staff is all internationally oriented. I mean, you heard about Janine. I have a background that includes work with international companies. Mike Hoover has a degree in international business. Megan Griego has actually lived in the Far East and speaks some Japanese, Janine speaks Serbian. I have some knowledge of French. Even our administrative specialist, who's finishing up her master's degree, okay, right now, is been to the Army Language School and speaks Arabic. So, I mean, we are really tuned into this international thing, and we've been waiting for it to develop statewide because you could see that it was a need, and we were prepared to lead it with the commitment of the city and you know, our partners here. So we really like this idea. And then I think the whole Greening Greater Phoenix, which is about to unroll here, which is about sustainability, again, surprises in a great place where it can lead that, especially if we can get into partnerships with ASU School of Sustainability. We're building on a school, or I mean a whole city, so we can be a laboratory for that. So anyway, a lot has really changed in the last 3 years. And I think we ought to take a minute and kind of celebrate what has happened, because, you know, you look at most cities. I mean, Barry, you were in Kalamazoo. Took 150 years to build that city. Mm-hmm. And, you know, here we are in Surprise, and we're trying to build it in 45 or 50. Well, that's, even if you move at light speed, you just have to go through the stages. And so a lot of work has been done here. So just to give you an idea here, in 3 years, you know, 3 years ago, there were no business parks in Surprise. There's one up on Bell and Grand that was sort of struggling. And besides that, there were nothing. Now there are 7 new business parks with over 1,000 acres. There was really only 1 retail center. There's now 6 new major retail centers that have been started. We have an auto mall that might become the largest one in the state, which, again, for tax dollars, big thing for us. We have 2 multi-story office buildings that have been built that weren't here 3 years ago, 1 even in the last year. We have 2 major hospitals that have announced they're coming to Surprise, one through an acquisition, that's the Sun Health banner, and the other one, Catholic Healthcare West. These will bring some really great jobs and more medical capacity to the city. We have 3 new hotels that have been built in the last 3 years, and more on the way. And, of course, the movie theater and bowling centers that have been important to people and are kind of a psychological win. But you know, if you think about it, here, a city with 100,000 didn't have a movie theater. So, I mean, these kinds of things just take time to build, and, you know, a lot has been accomplished by doing that. The city's been getting some great recognition. We were named by Foreign Direct Investment Magazine as one of the top 10 North American microcities of the future. Money Magazine gave us, we were ranked the highest in the country for 5-year job growth. This was in 2006. Relocate America named us one of the best places to live. Even Expansion Solutions Magazine named us a top 5 medical company for some of the things that we're doing with Sun Health. So we're getting the recognition that that we weren't getting in the past. In terms of our own department activity here, we worked with over 1,000 businesses in the last 3 years, and a particular point of pride for me is we have helped 92 people get into business in the last 3 years. And this is really extraordinary to see people come in, and then you go out and they're in their place of business, or they're working out of their home or whatever. And of course, then we've worked with some other companies too. And what's, again, going back to our retirees and baby boomers, we've had 90 business volunteers that we've recruited that are helping people here to start businesses. And these people are just absolutely invaluable. They know about franchising, they know about leases, they know about financing. It's just the talent pool here is absolutely extraordinary. So it's been really fun. We had some major developments, as we mentioned. These are, I mentioned them, summarize them. I won't read them all, but these are all projects that have come into being here just in the last 3 years. And of course, some of them still are being constructed, but gives us tremendous capacity that a lot of other communities don't really have. We've had some interesting companies that have come to the city. I mentioned the auto dealers. Of course, Crescent Crown is a really nice one, but you know, Trader Joe's was #1 on our retail list, and so we kind of knocked that off. It was really a great thing building their project now, and a little project going through our permitting process now called Ham Incorporated. This is a guy operating out of his garage who's going to build his first machine shop. And his machining work is absolutely extraordinary. He makes parts for NASA, and he makes parts for for medical equipment, like these beautiful machine parts that go into MRI machines. So, I mean, it tells you that there are, and you know, if there's one, there's got to be 100. And so discovering these people and bringing them out, you know, this is a terrific thing for us. We've got some works in progress. As you know, we've done a little feasibility study on biotech incubator, accelerator, also conference center, going through the transformation of to the Surprise Regional Chamber, and now, of course, the Western Trail Association, which has some tremendous promise, I think. So, you know, in general, the small and startup business is really exploding. Our whole industrial corridor is gaining terrific momentum. It's been interesting watching prospect visits from GPEC, because in the 3-4 years ago, we were getting maybe 1 or 2, maybe a few more than that. Now I looked, we've had 8 year to date, and that puts us 3rd behind Scottsdale and Phoenix, tied with Goodyear. And so we kind of have a personal thing in our shop. It's like, boy, we want to get right behind Phoenix. We don't know if we catch them because they get most of them, but
that's a cooperation.
yeah, you got it. So we're just working a little bit harder, and we're 1 behind Scottsdale. So, you know, and this wasn't happening. So this is really exciting, and part of it is because we've got the product that's starting to develop here, and we've got the relationships, and people are starting to find out about us. So high interest from environmental technology companies, not just solar, but other ones. We've got this tourism corridor that's been established, and of course Rio Salato's got some higher education underway, and getting this increasing recognition as a regional player. The healthcare biotech is really stalled right now in some respects because of the Banner-Sun Health merger, but there are great opportunities there. And we, just like sustainability, we have an opportunity in our healthcare because we can build out a healthcare system. And so we can do it in a new way, and that will be saleable. That's a product that there's some intellectual property that other people will look at and go, wow, yeah, why don't we change the way we do it? So we've talked to Sun Health about it. We've talked to others about it. I think it's going to take time, but it's a great opportunity there for us. So, you know, so what's next? Well, we've got opportunities and challenges. And, you know, let's talk about the opportunities. First is this whole solar and alternative energy thing. You know, when the economic positioning framework was done, it talked about alternative energy and solar. And I thought to myself, well, yeah, that's good. I mean, you have sunlight. You know, there's probably something to be done there. But these gas prices go through cycles, and, you know, is it really going to go anywhere? Well, my skepticism, I must say, has been way overcome, because the amount of solar activity looking at the metropolitan area and in our area in general here in Surprise is really strong as anything we've worked on. So I think the question for us is, well, how do we capitalize on that? Are we going to make a commitment to solar to make that happen? So that's a good question for us to talk about. The rail-served manufacturing, kind of the same thing. When I was in the Midwest, only a small percentage of manufacturing and distribution really uses rail. But because of the change in energy prices and because of the greater distances here and proximity to the West Coast, rail is really an important thing. And we've got it, and most other places don't. So it's really, you know, I wouldn't call it low-hanging fruit, because we're going to have to still work for it. But we have great opportunities there. Because of our aging population, which of course is a national thing, but here in Surprise, because we're surrounded by the Sun Cities, the whole diseases of aging, that's something we should just go for it, because everywhere else in the country is going to have the same kinds of problems and opportunities that we're experiencing right now, because we're ahead of the curve. If we can kind of light the way, people will come here to see how we did it, and we can make money off of it. Plus, we'll provide better health care. The other thing that I've been impressed with is our tournament business is starting to pick up. It's getting very interesting what's going on over in the rec department. You know, we have our baseball, we've got our tennis courts, but now we're starting to see, you know, high school tournaments and people coming in here, and with these kind of small group meetings and tied to that. And the other day they brought in a tournament, and one of the hotels tripled their occupancy, in like one weekend. So it just shows you the potential if we get on that, and we could own that because we're a family-friendly community. We've got some of the facilities. We continue to build that. We'll have people in here every weekend. And some of them will move here and live here. Then finally, just making calls in California last week, the California businesses are so tied up right now because of their business climate. Terrific opportunity to just go cherry pick in California. You can almost just do that alone. And then the international markets we've talked about. So what are the challenges? Loop 303, we have got to get that built. That's it's really holding us back. And I don't know what we can do, but we need to just redouble our efforts because everybody says, oh, when Loop 303 gets done, the doors are going to come off. And I don't know if that's true, but I think it will really help us. Secondly, Arizona has got a problem. It doesn't really have incentive packages. Every other state has them. And so what happens is it devolves to the local jurisdictions here to try and figure out what to do. We've been really creative. We've been working on some things, but I think it's time that we really look at it comprehensively and figure out how we're going to make this happen because incentives are really important. Just the reasons that Barry mentioned. I wanted to stand up and cheer. We all know about Luke Auxiliary 1 field and some of the deed restriction issues we have. The whole idea of preserving Luke, that's just keeping what we've got. But there may be some really creative ways that we can work with them, and that will take us up a whole nother level here, both in our downtown area and also out around Luke Auxiliary 1, which is a huge area that could be used for industrial or alternative energy or whatever. So terrific opportunity for us. We've been sort of beating the drum about business incubation space. There are some alternatives. One is to go over and work on the Enterprise Center, but this facility here could incubate some people someday. So, we can have more than one incubator. We can try some things. We can do some interim things. These are challenges. If we could put that together, I know we could grow businesses. But to really get to the knowledge industry, we've got to get more access here to higher education. Rio is just a start. It's a great start. I love what they're doing. It's so innovative. But it's like 1% of where we need to go. And so getting some other universities here, working with them, building that higher education center, and that will really help us with all the knowledge industries. So, so what are some trends that are likely to affect us? Well, this whole solar and environmental tech race, really strong right now. Thanks. And then, ironically, here's rail, which is all of a sudden getting positioned as clean technology because you put something on a rail car and you essentially take 3 or 5 trucks off of the road. I mentioned the aging baby boomers, just the sheer population growth here in the Northwest Valley, and the whole trend towards people becoming self-employed and working in strategic alliances. This is just a terrific opportunity for us to work on. And, the U.S. economic issues, well, we're going to have to kind of live through that, but because of the lower dollar, it does bring opportunities for us. It isn't all negative. And then the last thing that I mentioned is what I call black swan. And a black swan is just something that's totally unforeseen. And if you look at most great developments, either positive or negative, they're black swans. They're totally unforeseen. Well, one of the best things that we can do is to just be prepared and be scanning the horizon and looking for those opportunities that come along that we never foresaw and realize that they are what they are. Just think about somebody like Apple Computer that started with 2 high school kids messing around in their garage. Well, if we had somebody here, a couple of high school students, and they were messing around in their garage, we could have 2 choices. We could say, well, they're kids. They shouldn't be doing that. They might blow something up. Yeah. Or we could say, whoa, maybe those guys are the next Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Maybe we ought to go talk to them. So it might be something that simple. It might be just somebody moving here who does something. But I kind of maintain that the basis of our economy might be something like that we don't even know what it is. So being prepared and being open to that is really critical for us. And these are trends that will affect us. The other thing we need to do is and we learn this every day, and when we talk to companies, is we have to kind of understand how other people see us, because we have a view of ourselves, other people see us differently, and working off of that is really important. So we're up and comers. That's who we are. And I think that's the reputation we're gaining around the valley, is that, whoa, that's surprise. They're on the move. They're doing things there. And that's a great reputation to have. For a while, we were under the radar screen, but it's not so much anymore. So now we have to kind of live up to that promise, I guess. We're always viewed in the context of Greater Phoenix. You know, we can never be an island because we're always in the metropolitan area. People always see us that way when they're coming here to look at us, prospects. And we will be viewed in a global context. So we have to be global competitors and think about ourselves that way. And how we view our strengths and weaknesses isn't always how other people see them. You know, I had a site selector tell me one time, after I got to know him, he said, you know, communities talk to us all the time. They think they're telling us one thing. They're really telling us something else. So we have to really kind of think how our customers think so we understand how they view things and be sensitive to that. We're not urban. We're not really rural. We're kind of in the middle, but we're obviously rapidly urbanizing. So taking advantage of that is a key thing. And then the last thing is we've been the cheap place. We've had cheap land. People came out here and bought houses because they got a good deal. They were going to make a lot of money. If we're going to really kind of have this innovative, knowledge-based economy with the kinds of jobs that we would all love that really pay a lot, then we're going to have to find other differentiators. I think we have some of them, but they need to be developed, and we're going to need to commit to them and not just rest being the cheap place, because we'll get the cheap jobs, basically, if we do that. So Barry showed you the, you know, this is out of Area Development Magazine. They do this survey every year. It's what manufacturing companies typically look at. Labor is really a key thing here. I mean, we know about highway accessibility. When you go to service companies, the office type companies, you can just underline that whole thing about availability of labor. It's really, really important to them. So finding out who our labor force is, marketing that labor force appropriately, working for higher education, you know, building that sort of knowledge base, these are really key things for us. So some recommendations. Number one is confidence. I think we have confidence. It's been shaken a little bit maybe because of the recent economy, but more than that is commitment. Because, you know, you can go anywhere in the United States and you can talk to any economic developer and they're going to tell you how they love to have your company, how they really want them, how they're really committed to working with you, and we'll talk endlessly, okay, because that's what we do. But then you drill down and say, okay, so what programs do you have for solar or biotech? You know, do you have incentive programs? What infrastructure have you put in place? You know, where's your commitment? Where are your dollars in there that show that you're really committed? And where are the things that you're doing that you're only doing for my industry and not just kind of for everybody? Because that's really commitment, and that's what they look at. So we have a vision. I think we have a big vision in Surprise and big aspirations. But until we really, really commit to it, start putting dollars in it and in a comprehensive, focused way, which we're starting to do, but it needs to be accelerated, then we're going to be perceived to be just wannabes. You know, so this is important. So again, our department's had lots of demands put on it by the different plans that we've had, the council, other departments, other organizations. I think what we're seeing is, okay, now we're starting to figure it out here. We've got to get focused. And we see the focal points. You know, there are things like healthcare and life sciences, sustainability, and especially solar, the whole knowledge industry and harnessing the baby boomers, the rail serve part. You know, we have to get focused on those things because that's what's going to drive the economy, which will ultimately drive the retail, it drives the sales taxes, which, you know, keeps the government in business. So the way you do that, I believe, is we have to find unique amenities, things that are really differentiators. It's not enough to say, oh, well, we'll go do that because Scottsdale did it or something. Then we're just average. We've got to find the things that are unique and kind of plow our own way. And then lastly, I just threw it in because transportation is such a barrier here. We just got to keep working on transportation. So specifically, we would like to tackle with the council and the city management how we are going to incentivize companies. We've had some funds in the past. We've got tougher budget times, but now is when there's some tremendous opportunities, and we don't want to run out of gas. So we're going to have to be really creative, but we need to really work on this. Secondly, we think the whole idea of an incubator, accelerator, I call it an innovation center, where we can bring thinkers together and people want to start companies and drive our local economy in a tech direction. Again, that's part of that commitment. That would be something that would really be worth working on. Sustainability, because we're building on a new city, we need not only like a sustainability program that deals with businesses, but if we can show ourselves to be a sustainable community in a comprehensive way, then that will go a long way towards someone who's going to maybe make a $50 or $100 million investment, saying, "Yeah, I think my investment's safe there," because they're committed. They're like me. They're not going to throw a bunch of silly regulations at me down the road, or they're not going to raise my taxes 50% or whatever, because they believe in what I believe. And then again, 303. So, I guess that kind of ends my presentation. My thing is, hey, let's go make a great city, and certainly entertain any questions. And then we would, since we have some time, we would like to get into a discussion about, the vision, what you see, and how we can maybe put this together. So, questions?
Great, thank you. I've got one. Are you familiar with the city of Valencia?
Not particularly, no. But we're always looking for models.
That's a good model.
Yeah.
They got 20,000 houses and 60,000 jobs.
Whoa.
And it's really interesting the way they did it. So I would really, it's a suburb of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
So you think of it in the LA market, just like Surprise is thought of in Phoenix. We really ought to take a look at some of the things they did there.
Yeah,
Now they have a freeway that runs right through the middle of their city.
We will too.
Okay, Interstate 5 goes right through the middle of their city. But I've watched them over the years, and they've got an economic engine out there that's amazing. And they did it with a plan, And so anyway, that's one thing. The other thing is what works as incentives? What's your idea of incentives?
I think, we could talk about incentives forever because it's a little bit different for every company. But, in general, I think they have to hire a labor force, and that labor force is typically not productive on day one. So they like training. They like money up front for their labor force. They obviously like things like tax abatements or reimbursements of taxes that they've paid. But generally, the more cash, the more up front, the better they like it, and the more flexibility, obviously. And of course, that's the immediate tug of war, because we want performance, we want accountability, we want to stretch things out, and that's what you negotiate about.
So is it? Do we lead with that then? As a city, we don't lead with it. They come to. X company comes to us, says we like your city, we like your city, but we need some help, and here's where we need help.
Well, I think there's a couple of things. When when a company, there's two brains inside a company. There's the financial brain, and then there's the operational brain. And there's a struggle inside the company when a company makes a location decision. Especially for new companies, like emerging companies like these solars, or publicly traded companies, the financial brain is really going to drive a lot of that decision. That CFO is measured by return on capital, back to that boss. CEO's got to kick that back up to the director. And so when a company is locating in a market, the only way a New Mexico can get a shot is we're going to give you an unbelievable return on capital situation. We're going to give you the land. We're going to give you the improvement. I'm going to give you a $50 million development grant to help you pay for the construction. And so immediately when you construct the financial model, where am I getting my quickest return on this big capital outlay? That incentive makes that community win immediately. Now, if you're fortunate, that company has an operational leader inside the decision-making model that says, yeah, you ever tried to recruit 1,500 people to Albuquerque, New Mexico? I mean, we do have to actually run this company for 25 years in Albuquerque. So do you think you can recruit 1,500? Do you think you can recruit 1,500 qualified people there? I mean, not just warm bodies. You ever flown into Albuquerque from Germany? Kind of hard to do. You know, that kind of debate starts to happen. So from our perspective, what I think we need to be able to do is there's no reason for us. We're not Albuquerque. We don't need the Albuquerque economic development model. But we got to have enough of an incentive package, which is what this solar initiative does, to give that CFO enough pressure to say, well, I'm enriched in the return on capital discussion in Albuquerque, but my return on capital discussion in Surprise is adequate or positive. Not enriched, but positive. And that's the difference between throwing money at something and building a business plan for your city. Now that my return on capital discussion hurdle in Surprise has been met, wish I was enriched like Albuquerque, but I'm not. Now my operation guys are in the room saying, well, workers' comp rates and unemployment rates in Arizona are better than New Mexico. And I'm going to recruit 1,500 people, a heck of a lot easier in this company in Surprise than I am in Albuquerque. But when the hurdle can't be met by Arizona at all, and the CFO now, for an operational preference, there's no question Schott's operational preference was Greater Phoenix, Surprise and Chandler and Mesa, all three. But now the CFO has to go back to the CEO and say, we're going to pick a location and we can't meet our return on capital hurdles. Forget it. The CEO's going, you want me to sell that back to Wall Street, or do you want me to sell that back to the private equity group in Europe and New York that's given us $2 billion? I can't do it. John, you got to go back there and you better get in. You either better get the money out of Arizona to get that hurdle, or somebody better go into Albuquerque and buy the community college and tell them their full-time job in the next 2 years is to find us 1,500 people. And that's basically what happened. At the end of the day, there was an Intel closure in Albuquerque. I think it was Intel. And was that right? I think it was a semiconductor facility. I think it was Intel, but maybe I'm wrong. I'll double-check that. And now, all of a sudden, they had enough of a sell around to meet the operating expectations that the enriched return on capital discussion won. So the goal for us, even with our economic development programs, if we're successful, is to meet the return on capital hurdle so we're not blocked at the CFO from a decision, and then compete on the things you want us to compete on, better schools, better infrastructure, the kind of things that create broader wellness. And those two things married and balanced is really where I would see where we need to go.
So the CFO leads the exploration?
No, what the CFO does, the CFO hires, and this is what we do for you. We negotiate with the professional consulting network that these CFOs hire. So they hire Ernst & Young or Deloitte Touche, or they hire C2MH Hill, some big firm like that, and these guys are location experts that crunch numbers, make workforce decisions. They're generalists with a financial bend. They go out and come back and say, here's your top 5 or here's your top 10. Now, one of the other factors that also hurts us in Arizona, and it's unfair, is 90% of these consultants to the CFO say, not only will I pay for myself by giving you this return on capital, I'll exceed that, plus whatever fees I charge you, I'll get out of the negotiation with the communities. So now, in addition to having the CFO hurdle not met, the consulting team has promised the CEO and the board of directors that their $1 million fee will be easily surpassed in the negotiation of incentives, so they come back for Arizona without much. They don't meet the CFO hurdle. Then the consultant that promised himself as a self-liquidating consultant to the company can't meet that happen. Pretty soon, between the CFO and the consultant, they're all selling against Arizona. And that's really what happens in the negotiation on these.
John, education has been mentioned several times. Do you see the city of Surprise involved with our educational system? If so, do you see areas that we could improve?
Well, I mean, we are involved with them now. We obviously have some joint use agreements and things like that, which are great, I think. And some of us are working with education more or less as volunteers to try and work with the schools. But I think the schools are really important because they're the source of our labor force. And again, it shows commitment. So if we're trying to attract, let's say, a healthcare company, and one of the schools has a healthcare magnet, then that's something we can sell. And it's like, wow, that's really good, you know, that you have that. It shows commitment again. So I think there are some things we could do. We don't, you know, we have a lot to do here, both in our department and in the city, without trying to manage the school system, which is a huge undertaking. But we can certainly be great partners with them. And one of the strategic advantages that I believe we have as a city and a school system is that we're building out our physical system. So we can build it out like no one else can build it out who has legacy schools. They have to go retrofit their schools or change them to, you know, be in the right place or whatever. We kind of have the ability to direct that. And that to me is a terrific advantage that if we think about it seriously, we ought to be able to build a better physical school system and a better physical city and also better operating structures. So, you know, and then people come and see how we did it.
I got a question in regard to that. Maybe Brett can answer this. Did Franklin Pierce come to Goodyear, or did Goodyear go to Franklin Pierce?
No, I can tell you that. Goodyear put out an RFP for private, basically schools.
Oh, that's what they
Yeah,
did?
they did.
Okay.
Yeah, they put it out all over the country. And then they had several responses, and they narrowed it down to, I guess, 3 people they wanted to work with. And then they've created an incentive program to make that happen.
And I think,
So-
you know, from my standpoint, you know, I think, I've had people say we should go after Notre Dame. I don't know that Notre Dame's going to leave South Bend, but I do think that there are other larger universities. You know, I worked a little bit on this downtown medical school, which is very important to the entire valley and state. And there are university medical colleges that are world class that are looking out 5 or 10 years where they're out, and they know they can't make it there anymore. You know, they just can't make it. And they're already starting to tap their foundations that they built over 50 years to try to offset, you know, the decline in patients and the decline in reimbursements. So there are some major premier universities that you would know by name that are stellar, that are starting to get the business indications that they may have to leave that market in order to succeed. And that's where I think there's going to be real, you know, opportunity. You know, I think schools like Rose-Hulman in Terre Haute, Indiana, which is really pound for pound the premier engineering school in the world. You know, that's a school we could get to open a branch and surprise. And now you're talking about, when someone says Rose-Hulman, now you're talking about the best school, one of the, you know, U.S. News and World Report rates it the #1 engineering school every year.
Purdue, huh?
Yeah, they say it's better, but Purdue's a very good engineering school. Both of the schools are outstanding. But actually, the head of Rose-Hulman is the former head of ASU Polytechnic Institute under Michael Crow. So he's even an Arizona guy. So I think, you know, to me, you know, it's about, you know, is it in, you know, specialty engineering? You know, maybe it's schools that are struggling to stay solvent where they're at. I mean, that's the kind of opportunity I think is for us, specifically in the West Valley. I think ASU Polytechnic campus is probably going to build out to 20, 30,000 students in between ASU's presence in Tempe and the Polytechnic Institute. You'll see maybe some specialty liberal arts college, you know, surface in the East Valley, but I think the opportunity to drive new higher education assets into the market is almost exclusively the West Valley. Tucson's the University of Arizona town. They're not going to do it because U of A is going to frown upon it. And I think that leaves a big opportunity for the West Valley. And we got to kind of play with it a little bit more and learn more about it, because we might be the first community in the history of the United States to use that as an economic development strategy. It's not been done before. So we're going to be pioneering at it and trying to figure it out. I did work with Drew Brown a little bit and about Verrado, about relocating a liberal arts college of 2,000 or 3,000 students in whole from one part of the country to there. And, I mean, you know, they wanted about $100 million, and that was the number they wanted. And I wasn't sure, you know, it would have been his money, so he was pretty sure he wasn't going to give him $100 million. I don't know that you could convince Buckeye City Council to do $100 million for a liberal arts college in Verrado. But, I mean, I think those are the kind of things we got to think about, plan for now. And, you know, I know we've had some surpluses, and you know, we're going to get back on our feet, and we're going to get to one of those eras when we have a big surplus. And we kind of now know that these surpluses are kind of migrant, economic benefits that are maybe short-term and something we shouldn't model long-term into our economy. But if we get into a couple years where we're sitting on some big surpluses, we might want to consider off. I think what Goodyear found out is just throwing a line out there and a little bit of money got them some interest. But, I think if you put $100 million together and put a package together and went out into the Northeast, I think schools like, Temple and Penn and some of these schools, you go knock on the Wharton School of Business door with $100 million, and I'll tell you, if Wharton Business School decided they were going to use their western location to be surprised, you talk about a brand change and an economic change overnight, and it would be. And now all of a sudden your entire class of talent and industry becomes internationally recognized and world class immediately. I think those are the kind of things that I think about. But again, it's totally experimental. I mean, there's not like there's no test case anywhere in the United States that we can use, so we'll be making it up ourselves.
And I think that's where we as a council have not just a responsibility, but an opportunity to be a bit creative and innovative in our thinking, in our leadership for the city, to be able to take action when action is going to be required, because often it seems that these opportunities, they move by fairly quickly. And so I believe that we're the group that can be responsive to those opportunities.
Well, you think of State of Washington as an example. They got University of Washington, Washington State, Seattle University, Seattle Pacific, Pacific Lutheran, Gonzaga, Eastern, Western. They're the same size as Arizona.
That's right.
6 million people.
Right.
They got a lot of schools.
Right.
Yeah, in fact, one of the things that's notable about Arizona is the lack of private liberal art colleges. And my own theory about it is it's just because the state isn't very old, and they haven't had a chance to develop yet. But I mean, you go to other states that have a longer history, and there's 20 or 30 of those, and they make a terrific contribution. Plus, the small private specialty schools like the engineering schools or whatever, or law schools. So, it's something that needs to develop in the state. But see, here we are in Surprise. We have an opportunity that potentially could lead something like that because we're building out our city again. So, I mean, some imagination, but again, some commitment, because it doesn't happen overnight. But, maybe it starts with, well, hey, the weather's nice down here in December. I noticed that you have an interim class period that lasts a month between your first 2 semesters. If we made some space available down here, maybe you'd like to offer some special courses or something, and then you develop a relationship, develops into a branch campus, away you go.
I think the other opportunity too is, the best information communication technology schools in the world right now are emerging in India. And, Crow has gone out in Shandu and opened up a campus presence in China. How many universities in India would like a campus presence in Surprise? And so it may even be where if we go into the Northeast and try and drag one of these great traditional powerhouses into investing out here, protocol, academia, all of the things that drive their Ivy Tower mentality might preclude them from doing that. But I would be willing to bet that we could probably find some of these world-class universities in India and China and really convince them. That'd be a really cool thing if you had the best information communication technology school from India and Surprise. And if you're talking about foreign direct investment, I mean, if you want to see Indian entrepreneurs that want to penetrate the U.S. market, a good example is University of Michigan. University of Michigan went to India a long, long time ago. And if you go into Detroit, Ann Arbor, what is left of their software information communication technology corridor really is almost exclusively Indian entrepreneurs that went to the University of Michigan, went back home, built their companies, and then when they wanted to bring their U.S. presence, dropped it in Detroit, Ann Arbor, because that's where they were 4 years, and they had their friends and fraternity brothers. And there's actually an angel network in Michigan that is Michigan alumni from India that is capitalizing backing wireless technology companies in Michigan from India. So, it's that Indian economy is really interesting. What I like about that economy is it's, the British Empire did us a lot of favors with their imperialism. You know, there's a lot of these countries that are emerging now that are coming out of third world status that have European laws of doing business in European court. So if you're in India, it's just like doing business in the United States. Intellectual property, contracts, how you get sued, how you don't get sued. Same thing with Dubai. You know, we've done this in Dubai. All those people are London educated. So, you know, their protocols on business, unlike the Chinese, you know, are Western and law abiding in our perspective. So I think schools in India, universities in India, would be a really cool place to start to look at for a university strategy in the West Valley.
Anything else?
I just have a statement. Employment generation and revenue generation are a little, I mean, employment generation is more of an amenity, I think, for our citizens. It doesn't necessarily mean, Barry, that you're going to increase the revenues that we have to spend on other things like fire and police and water and sewer and stuff like that. So there's a balance to me. There's employment generation, which is a benefit or amenity, I see it, not necessarily a revenue generator. But we also got to be careful in these times where budgets are tough that we also need to take care of those, and those can't fall behind either, because nobody wants to locate in a place that they're not safe or is going down. So we, as a council, we've got to balance that out. But I think we've done some things here, John, where you mentioned the Skyway Business Park, the Skyway 2, the Summit Business Park. So we're starting to get some of those places in already. And they're called, I don't know if you guys call them shovel-ready sites or something like that. But so that's a big benefit, because the only thing I heard, or the major thing I heard from other cities, was why people locate there is they were ready. They didn't have to wait 5 years for infrastructure and stuff like that. So I think we're on the right track. I think now we just need to sort of start closing some things and saying, hey, we're here and we have it ready, and get out there and close on some of these things. So I like it. I appreciate your help, Barry and John. So I think we're there. We just need now to go out there and grab them and get them in here. So thank you.
Barry, I got a question. What is GPEC doing to help the 303 accelerate?
Well, our goal was to hold our support on the transportation package hostage for it, and you know that was part of it. You know, it was one of those deals when they put this time coalition. I don't know if you've heard of this, but this was 1.5 years ago, and they said we're going to put a transportation plan and do all these wonderful things. And you're an economic developer. I mean, that's like, you know, offering me a hot dog. I'm going to say yeah, you know. So I said sure. So we let our name do it, and as it's built, you know, we were anticipating that we would have the chance. We would have our communities would have a chance to impact it. As it got rolled out, you know, I started getting alarmed over, you know, there wasn't a mayor that I ran into that was happy. Now that's not completely impossible for that to occur, but usually not quite like this. You know, I mean, not dismally unhappy. It wasn't positioning either. I haven't heard any of the mayors or the cities. It's not a jockey and I didn't get the 202 and they got the 303 thing. I think it's a general discontent that we haven't had input. We're paying for this. The benefit is going outside of our region. It may even be creating competitive disadvantages for Maricopa County, which is the urban county. We have to start paying attention to that, as John was saying. And so from our perspective, my role, I meet with, one thing you get with me is I meet with the governor every 2 weeks. There's 12 people that meet with the governor every 2 weeks for an hour and a half. And I'm usually in there asking about the transportation plan. And I think that we should probably, I've asked for a briefing on that plan from the Arizona Department of Transportation, and we should probably have some type of caucus that would include GPEC to take a look at that. Now, I think most people aren't as reactive to it now because the polling information that's coming out on it isn't very favorable. So I don't think there's a lot of people that have a lot of confidence that it would pass. And so I think some of the sting is taken out of it, and where it looks like it's kind of a awkward dry run for the real deal now. So, you know, you always kind of keep your powder dry for the real fight. But I think out of this transportation discussion, I think as a region, either we need to weigh in now or be ready to make sure that we weigh in on it in the future. It gets down, you know, and this gets down to, and your council is going to be a council that's going to change this. It gets down into the optimism of the professionals that the political leadership will follow their recommendations. you spend a lot of time, countless hours, weekends and evenings, working on things that you think really matter that sometimes the political leadership just won't come along and embrace. And I think what happened on that transportation bill, and I'm just guessing, is my guess is MAG didn't think it was going to go very far. Probably didn't grab onto it as hard as they should have. And then as the governor got excited about it, pretty soon it looked like it was going to move forward with or without our input. And then we've been trying to play catch-up on that from an input standpoint. As we've been playing catch-up on the input standpoint and trying to modify it, its political possibilities have been plummeting with the tax and with the message on the street, the lack of enthusiasm in the market. And so I think as far as going forward we really have to make this 303 a deal breaker for any transportation bill, in my opinion, going forward, state or otherwise. And then I think if this effort right now is kind of, a learn how to work together experience that may not have ballot appeal, I think as soon as this thing goes up, goes down, or fails, if that's what it does, we got to get on this right now, restructure how this money gets invested, get the city managers and the community leaders at the table, and get that ballot issue restructured for 2010 and structured in a way that makes the 303 go and corrects the I-10. And I'm also, I always get whacked around over the head on this, but I just saw a report where automobile use in the next 5 years is expected to decline 40% in the United States. So one of the ways that your residents are going to want to work at some point is mass transit. And, these international markets that like us, if you've ever been in Europe, it is an amazing mass transit system. And one of the things that we get to do, in addition to being the pioneers on how you locate higher education resources into your community, because you're growing at the 100-year growth pattern occurs in 15 years in Arizona, so we can't wait for the church-led liberal arts colleges to grow over time like they did in Ohio and Indiana and other places. But I think we're also going to be able, we could be, if we embraced it, could be the bold leaders on mass transit, and I think that could be as powerful as anything. I mean, if you're a Surprise resident and all you got to do is step on your transit and you get to move in and out of this market, when I used to do a lot of stuff in Chicago, I still do a little bit there, but you fly into O'Hare and you get on the Chicago Transit Authority, and for $1.50, you're on the other side of town and getting off within a couple blocks walk to your hotel. When you can move, and it's 2 hours in the car versus 45 minutes by the train. I mean, 2 hours in a car now costs you $40. The train's 45 minutes and it costs you $1.50. And I really think that mass transit debate, which was considered not as viable when the light rail came out, having that thing built, so the transportation plan for me going forward, not an expert, just a consumer like anybody else, having that 303 finished, coming up with some kind of relief on the I-10, and then having some bigger commitment to mass transit rail, I think could be a really exciting opportunity for us as a global economy, because Japanese travel by rail, the Chinese are going to travel by rail, the Europeans travel by rail, and I think as European, Asian, and Canadian markets converge in the valley, they're going to want to travel by rail because that's what they're going to be accustomed to. At $6-7 a gallon, not hard to believe in the next 2-3 years. I know our residents are going to want to travel by rail too.
Mayor?
Yes.
Yeah, Council, and just really quickly, I just wanted to thank John and his team for, inviting GPEC over to speak to us. I know that they've been doing a lot of good work, and that was one of the reasons, we wanted to see it down in paper and show that, in spite of the times, there's still a lot that's happening in Surprise, and I know that this was a really good opportunity for ED to make sure that we're moving in the direction that you all, want us to move, and I know that employment has been a big issue, and we've had a couple of opportunities, and we're here waiting to hear, hopefully, on a couple of them as well. But just to say that thanks for the opportunity, and I know that they've been moving ahead and trying to put incentive programs together that I think are doable, and I think we're going to be able to. They're not going to challenge us, I think, as much as maybe we suspected. But again, thanks to John and to your shop, Barry, as well, for working with us on this.
Any other comments? I would also like to thank both of you gentlemen. Appreciate coming out here and spending this time with us. Hopefully we can set up some future, maybe 1 hour updates, good ideas start coming down the pipe, that you'd share them with us, let us know how we might want to position on them, and maybe, really make this partnership a true partnership, where we're having dialogue back and forth.
I've
We know what
enjoyed
each
that.
other's doing,
Yeah,
and we work together.
enjoyed that. Thank you for having me.
You're
Enjoyed it very much.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Barry.
Meeting adjourned.
I want to sign off by letting you know that if you need to talk to me or want to talk to me, please call at 222-1231 or email me at